The Trump administration withdrawing from a decades-old nuclear treaty with Russia. Rich Edson's live from the State Department. Rich, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Sandra. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Russia is brazenly disregarding its obligations under the INF Treaty, so the United States will suspend its obligations beginning tomorrow. Pompeo just made the announcement from the podium behind us here. He says that there's no sense in the U.S. continuing to comply with the INF Treaty if Russia refuses to do so.
It does no good to sign an agreement if a party's not going to comply with it. The piece of paper, if it's not being complied with, doesn't reduce the risk. It doesn't take down that threat.
Now, this suspension gives Russia 6 more months to comply with the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty before the U.S. formally withdraws. Officials expect Russia will refuse because Pompeo says for 6 years the U.S. has gone to what he says are tremendous lengths to preserve the INF Treaty and that Russia refuses to return to compliance. Now, in December, the U.S. declared that Russia was in material breach of this treaty, gave Russia 60 days to comply. There were some discussions between U.S. and Russian officials. They collapsed, and the U.S. says it's now suspending. A senior State Department official says Russia must destroy its new cruise missile launchers and associated equipment in order to come back into compliance. The Russian government, though, says that this new missile program is compliant with this 1987 INF treaty. The treaty prohibits the testing and deploying of any land-based cruise or ballistic missiles with a range of about 300 to 3,400 miles. Administration officials also argue that if Russia's not complying, China's not even a part of this treaty, it puts the United States at a strategic disadvantage. Though there are critics of the U.S. suspending and potentially withdrawing, saying that this will lead to proliferation around the world, which certainly isn't a good thing. The Secretary of State says that that's a priority of the administration to prevent that. Back to you.
A lot happening there in just the last few minutes. Rich Edson, thank you.
There you can see our Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, at the Department of State, where he announced that the United States is withdrawing from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty as effective tomorrow, February 2nd. Let's bring in Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the President of the United States. She's inside the building. The weather outside, not great. Kellyanne, what does this all mean?
Well, I'm going to allow Secretary Pompeo's statements speak for themselves. He's our chief diplomat. Obviously, he had a big announcement today, didn't leak, and I will let his words speak. But I think in the broader scheme of this president's relations around the globe, he is somebody who's trying to bring peace and prosperity here and abroad, but at the same time, his America First policy extends all the way around the globe as well. And his first duty is to keep us all safe. It's why he's trying to secure the southern border, and it's also why he's trying to negotiate around the globe where appropriate.
Sure. I've been watching people on TV and hearing them on the radio talk about how, this president is never tough on Russia. Well, it looks like we just got tough on Russia.
Yeah, well, he's been tough on Russia for a while, and I'd like to see how they're going to spin this one. This is a president who has put additional sanctions on Russians, on bad actors, where he and his Treasury Department have seen fit. He's expelled 60-plus Russians from this country, shut down 2 of their consulates at last count, and I think pushed back on Putin not once but twice when one of his puppets, Assad in Syria, gassed his own people. When the president saw that, he took action immediately. And so that should not be conflated with the fact that when he wants to meet with Vladimir Putin, as they did several months ago for all the world to see in a joint press conference, they're discussing issues where these 2 major countries maybe can work together to defeat ISIS once and forever. Of course, the territorial caliphate in Syria is all but destroyed. The president just tweeted about these endless wars in Syria and Afghanistan. He promised to get out of them, $50 billion a year, a lot of treasure, and more importantly, lives lost. And so I would like to see how they spin this, that maybe he's trying to show this because he's worried about the collusion that doesn't exist. It's really silly. People have to start looking at the facts and the figures about how tough this president has been on Russia, at the same time trying to negotiate peace where he can, and big resolve by 2 major countries where it's appropriate.
Kellyanne, Senator Cory Booker from New Jersey announced this morning that he's going to be running for president. It's a Friday. We're heading into the weekend. What is the administration's reaction to that?
Welcome. The water seems warm. Welcome to dive in along with, 10, 15, 30 other Democratic candidates. I would ask him a couple of questions today as he runs from my native New Jersey. One is, what's wrong with the candidates that are already in there? What's your objection to Kamala Harris running, Elizabeth Warren, Kirsten Gillibrand, these others who have already announced, Tulsi Gabbard maybe? If he were a Republican running against them, they would immediately call him a sexist for running against these women in the Democratic field. But I'd also ask him, what exactly have you accomplished that qualifies you to be the commander-in-chief and president of the United States? And being a motivational speaker who's, quote, tinny, the words of David Axelrod, the mastermind behind President Obama's presidential victories, he sort of slammed him today by saying he doesn't really sound like an inspirational leader sometimes. He sounds like more like a motivational speaker who can be tinny. I think people witnessed that when he unloaded for all the cameras to see on now Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh.
Spartacus moment.
Well, his Spartacus moment, but it went beyond that. Remember, he was pretending that he was breaking with protocol in the Senate, that he was going to release confidential emails, and I believe it was Senator Cornyn of Texas reminded him that those had already been released. He also, I think people should go and look at his record in Newark, New Jersey. Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, about 8 or 9 years ago, gave $200 million in matching funds to Newark for its school system, and a whole bunch of that, millions and millions of dollars, went to politically connected consulting firms.
A lot of it didn't pan out.
And you know, I first came upon Cory Booker many years ago when he was a pro-school choice advocate. But the modern Democratic Party in which he's running for the presidential nomination has moved so far to the left that he can't even bring himself to continue to help those school children.
Well, Kellyanne, let's talk about the left, because Speaker Nancy Pelosi basically suggested to the president, open up the government and I'm going to negotiate. Yesterday she had a news conference, first one in a while, and said no money for the wall. Do you feel had?
No, not at all. She's revealing who she is, and she's against rank-and-file members in her Democratic conference who were elected in Trump districts. There are 31 of them. 22 of them are freshmen. They and Trump won the same congressional districts. You've got to believe that they represent people who believe border security is national security, think it's a great idea to work on DACA, TPS, to have 2,750 new Border Patrol agents, 75 new immigration judges, and all the support that requires. Also, $800 million to meet humanitarian needs, $800 additional million for technology and drug detection. We just had, at a port of entry, but we just had the largest seizure of fentanyl in the history of this nation. 254 pounds could have killed over 50 million Americans, a street value of $102 million. Yes, it came at a port of entry, but that's the stuff we know about. What about everything we don't know about that's coming?
Luckily, they do scanning at those ports, which is the president has asked for more money for that as well. Kellyanne, thank you very much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For years, Russia has violated the terms of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty without remorse. We provided Russia an ample window of time to mend its ways and for Russia to honor its commitment. Tomorrow, that time runs out.
That's right. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announcing that the U.S. is leaving the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Russia. The implications of that, the significance of that, with retired Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin. General, good to have you. What do you make of this?
Well, I think what you see here is a president who looked at this just like he did the Iran deal and the Paris Climate Change Treaty and said, now, why are we doing this? We know they're cheating. We know they're violating it. Why are we doing this? It doesn't make sense. And I think that what he is doing was done the right way, and it is absolutely the right decision. And why did it take, at least 3 administrations before him not dealing with it? Why did it take Donald Trump to come along and do this?
Did we know, General? I mean, back in your day, did you know that this was going on or suspect it was going on? I know it's been whispered that they weren't adhering to this sort of thing, but what changed?
Well, we confirmed it in about 2013, and it became rather public in 2013. But yeah, we knew before then that the Russians were violating this. So this was no surprise when it was actually announced that they were doing that.
You know, I do want to talk about this, but I'd be remiss, since you were in intelligence as well, to maybe give us your thoughts on the battle the president has had, calling out his intelligence team, saying they were wrong about some of these security threats from Iran and elsewhere, North Korea. Now he's kind of saying in a tweet they're all on the same page. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, let's just look at it practically. What we saw the intelligence community giving an unbiased, non-political assessment of where the world threats stand today, what affects America. That is exciting to me because during the last 8 years under the Obama administration, we actually feared the intelligence community because of what they were doing to or against Americans. And now you've got a very open and candid assessment that came out. I think the president's reaction initially was just exactly what we've seen before. It was a knee-jerk reaction, but I think that he is now walking that back. And look, he is allowing these people, good people that he selected to run these agencies, he's allowing them to give an honest assessment here, and it restores my faith in the intelligence community, Neil.
Do you think that should be done privately, though, sir?
Well, I think that the president should know what they're going to say before they go up there. But I can assure you that if the president wanted to, if the advisors around him wanted him to take their briefing and get at least the highlights of what they were going to say, it's available to him. But he is the president of the United States and probably the busiest man in the world. So I don't know why he didn't know that ahead of time. But that's something for his administration to work out.
But wouldn't they have been able to know amongst themselves, these are all smart folks, that this is, in some cases, a 180 from what the boss is saying? We ought to be on the same page here.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's certainly coordination between the various elements of the intelligence community. And, of course, Dan Coats has the statutory responsibility for the entire intelligence community, so he has to know what Gina Haspels is going to say from the CIA. So there is that kind of collusion, coordination. But again, I want to say that I was not surprised by anything that they said. Anybody that watches what's going on in the world that stays on top of this was not surprised by that. The only thing that surprised me was when Dan Coats called for a restructuring of the intelligence community, and I thought he was dead on with that, but I did not expect to hear that.
Or that he might not have run that by the president.
Well, yeah, that's correct. But it was in response to a question which... True. But, you know, the last reform was 2004 in the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act, which came out of the 9/11 report. So I think that the fact that he's calling for it is a very positive thing because it is time for the intel world to look at itself.
All right. See, I can challenge you on that, General, because you're on remote. If you were here in person, I would not have asked you that obnoxious question, but you are remote. Always good seeing you, my friend. Thank you very, very much.